My name is Emma Larson, 31 years old and a veteran of the United States Army. I never thought my military service would be questioned at my own father's will reading, but there stood my brother, Michael, pointing his finger at me. No benefits, no claims, she's a fake vet, he jeered loudly. What Michael failed to notice was my lawyer quietly slipping an unopened envelope to the judge. As the judge read its contents, her face went pale. Officers, seal this court immediately. Before I tell you how that envelope changed my life forever, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happened next in this courtroom showdown. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, our family seemed picture perfect from the outside. My father, James Larson, my mother, Margaret, my brother, Michael, who was 5 years older than me, and myself. We lived in a modest two-story house with a white picket fence at 214 Elmwood Lane, the quintessential American dream. Dad ran a small but successful construction company that specialized in commercial renovations, a business he built from the ground up with nothing but determination and skilled hands. Life changed dramatically when I turned 14. Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer, and within 6 months, she was gone. The loss devastated our family in different ways. Dad threw himself into work, putting in 16-hour days to avoid coming home to an empty house. Michael, 19 at the time, stepped into a role as Dad's right-hand man at the company, skipping college to help keep the family business afloat. And then there was me, the youngest. Suddenly, without a mother during those critical teenage years, I retreated into academics, finding solace in books and studying. Dad noticed Michael's sacrifice but seemed to overlook my straight A's and academic achievements. It wasn't that he didn't care. He just connected more easily with Michael, who reminded him of himself at that age. Michael is a natural businessman, Dad would say proudly at dinner. One day, all this will be his to run. Those words stung more than Dad probably realized, not because I wanted the business necessarily, but because they implied I wasn't even considered in the equation. The special treatment Michael received was subtle but constant. A new truck for his 18th birthday, while I got a used sedan for mine. Michael's opinion on business matters was sought and valued, while my suggestions were met with polite nods and quick subject changes. Dad paid for Michael's apartment downtown near the company headquarters at 105 Market Street, but questioned why I needed my own place when I started community college. As the years passed, the dynamic between Michael and me grew increasingly strained. What started as typical sibling rivalry morphed into something more toxic, at least on his end. I wanted my father's approval, but Michael seemed to need his exclusive attention. Any accomplishment of mine was somehow twisted by Michael to minimize its importance. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, Michael convinced Dad they needed to attend an important client meeting that same day. They arrived just as my speech ended, missing the moment I had worked so hard for. Michael's excuse was flimsy at best, and the hurt in my eyes was met with indifference in his. After 2 years at community college, I transferred to Ohio State University with a partial scholarship. I majored in international relations with a minor in Arabic, fascinated by global politics and different cultures. When I graduated with honors, Dad attended alone. Michael was too busy finalizing a major contract. It was during my final semester that I met a military recruiter on campus. Lieutenant Emily Carter painted a picture of purpose, challenge, and respect that resonated with something deep inside me. The structure, the chance to serve something bigger than myself, the opportunity to use my language skills in meaningful ways. It all spoke to me. When I announced my decision to join the Army after graduation, Michael scoffed openly. Really, Emma? The military? This is just another one of your attempts to get Dad's attention. Not everything is about Dad. Michael, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Some of us make decisions based on what we believe in, not just what we stand to gain. Dad's reaction was mixed concern for my safety ward with a reluctant pride he couldn't quite hide. Are you sure about this, Emma? It's a big commitment. I'm sure, Dad. This is something I need to do. The day I left for basic training, Dad hugged me tightly, whispering, your mother would be proud. Michael gave me a stiff, formal handshake and a warning. Don't come running back when you realize how tough the real world is. I shouldered my bag and walked toward the bus, hope mingling with determination. Maybe in the Army, I would finally find the respect and recognition I had always craved. Maybe there my contributions would matter. What I didn't realize then was how completely that decision would transform not just my life, but the very foundation of our family. Basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, was every bit as challenging as I expected and exactly what I needed. The physical demands pushed me beyond limits I didn't know I had, while the mental discipline gave me a framework for the chaos of life. For the first time, I was judged solely on my performance, not in comparison to anyone else. My Arabic language skills and degree in international relations caught the attention of my superiors early on. After completing basic training, I was selected for additional specialized training in military intelligence. This wasn't the path I had initially expected, but I embraced it wholeheartedly. The work was intellectually demanding and deeply meaningful. We were trained in intelligence gathering, analysis, and operations that required both mental agility and physical resilience. 6 months into my new role, I met Captain Laura Mitchell, who became both my mentor and closest friend in the service. 9 years my senior, Laura had the kind of quiet confidence that commanded respect without demanding it. She took me under her wing, recognizing something in me that even I couldn't see yet. "You have good instincts, Larson," she told me during a late-night training exercise. "But more importantly, you have compassion alongside your analytical skills. That combination is rare and valuable in our line of work." My first deployment to the Middle East came 2 years into my service. I can't share many details, but I was part of a specialized unit that worked closely with local assets to gather critical intelligence. My language skills proved invaluable, and for 18 months, I immersed myself in a world far removed from the Ohio construction business and family dynamics I'd left behind. Communication with home was sporadic during this time. Dad sent care packages and letters expressing his growing pride in my service. Michael rarely communicated directly, occasionally adding a perfunctory note to Dad's letters. I told myself it didn't matter that I had found my purpose and my family in the Army. 4 years into my service came the mission. That would change everything. Our intelligence unit received information about a high-value target meeting in a remote location near the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. The operation was classified at the highest levels, with only a small team aware of the full scope and potential impact. Laura and I were part of a 6-person team sent to verify the intelligence and provide real-time analysis for a potential operation. What should have been a standard reconnaissance mission quickly went sideways when our position was compromised. The attack came just before dawn. Explosions rocked our small outpost, followed by sustained gunfire from multiple directions. Laura was coordinating evacuation protocols when the second blast hit, collapsing part of the structure. Through the dust and chaos, I saw 3 of our team members down, including Laura, who was pinned under a fallen beam. Training kicked in, overriding fear. I managed to drag 2 team members to safety before returning for Laura. The building was groaning, threatening to collapse entirely. Enemy fire continued to pepper the area, but all I could focus on was reaching her. "Leave me, Larson," Laura ordered when I reached her, her voice strained with pain. "That's a direct command. Get to the extraction point." "With all due respect, Captain, that's not happening," I replied, working to free her from the debris. What happened next is still a blur in my memory. There was another explosion, closer this time. I remember throwing myself over Laura as the world erupted around us. Something hit me hard in the back and left side. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, but somehow, I maintained consciousness long enough to see the rescue team arrive. I woke up 3 days later in a military hospital in Germany. The damage was extensive: 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, severe shrapnel wounds to my back and left leg, and a traumatic brain injury from the blast impact. The doctors told me I was lucky to be alive. Laura survived, too, though her injuries were serious. When she was well enough to visit my hospital room, she brought news that stunned me. "The intelligence we gathered before the attack was solid gold," she said, her voice low. "Despite the secure location, it led to one of the most significant operations in the past decade. And your actions saved not just our team, but potentially the entire operation." What I didn't know then was that due to the classified nature of the mission, all records of my involvement and injuries were sealed at the highest levels. My medical treatment and recovery would be documented under generic codes. The true nature of my service, hidden behind layers of national security protocols. My recovery was slow and painful. 6 months of surgeries and physical therapy, followed by another 6 of cognitive rehabilitation for the TBI. The physical scars would fade with time, but some injuries would never fully heal. I still carry shrapnel in my left leg, and certain loud noises can trigger debilitating migraines. Souvenirs from the blast that nearly took my life. During one of her visits, Laura brought a small box. Inside was a medal, one of the highest honors a soldier can receive. Awarded in a private ceremony, attended only by those with the necessary security clearance. You earned this, Emma, Laura said, her eyes shining with pride. And something else regret, perhaps. That your sacrifice will never be publicly acknowledged. I was just doing my job, I replied. The standard response, though we both knew it was much more than that. The nature of your service and this award will remain classified indefinitely, she explained. Your official records will show honorable service, but none of the specifics. Even the Veterans Affairs Department won't have access to the full details. I understood the implications immediately. To the outside world, including my family, I would appear to be just another veteran with an honorable discharge, no special recognition, no public acknowledgement of sacrifice, no explanation for the lingering effects of injuries they couldn't know about. I didn't do it for recognition, I said, and I meant it. After 8 years of service, I received an honorable discharge with a medical component that was carefully worded to protect classified information. My official record showed that I had served with distinction, but contained no details of the specific operation or the true nature of my injuries. As I prepared to return to civilian life, Laura, now promoted to major, made me a promise. If you ever need anything at all, you call me. We take care of our own. Emma, don't you forget that. I left the army with invisible wounds and invisible honors, returning to a family who could never know the full truth of what I had done or what it had cost me. Coming home after 8 years in the military was harder than I anticipated. The structured environment of army life had become my normal, and civilian freedoms felt strangely overwhelming. Simple decisions like what to wear each morning or when to eat lunch suddenly required active thought. The constant alertness that had kept me alive in combat zones didn't switch off just because I was back on American soil. I rented a small apartment in our hometown at 309 Cedar Avenue, about 20 minutes from Dad's house. My military savings provided a cushion while I figured out my next steps. The Department of Veterans Affairs helped with transition services, but I couldn't tell them about my classified injuries, which complicated the process of getting appropriate support. My first visit to Dad's house revealed changes I wasn't prepared for. At 63, he looked much older than his years. His once robust frame had thinned, and deep lines etched his face. The business was still successful, now expanded under Michael's management. But Dad had stepped back from day-to-day operations. Doctor says I need to take it easy, he explained when I asked about his health. Heart isn't what it used to be. Michael handles most things now. Speaking of Michael, my brother was notably absent from my homecoming. He had moved to a large house in the wealthy part of town at 782 Willow Drive with his wife, Sarah, and their 2 children, a family I had only seen in photographs during my deployment. According to Dad, Michael visited briefly each Sunday for dinner but was otherwise consumed with running the company and his own family life. Those first few weeks home, I settled into a routine of morning runs as much as my leg would allow, job applications, and evening visits with Dad. We developed a comfortable rhythm, different from the strained relationship of my youth. Dad seemed genuinely interested in hearing about my service, though I could only share sanitized versions of my experiences. I always worried about you over there, he confessed one evening as we sat on his porch swing. Kept your picture right by my bed so I could say goodnight to you. Just like when you were little. The admission touched something deep inside me, all those years of feeling less valued than Michael. And here was evidence that Dad had carried me in his heart all along. As the weeks turned to months, Dad and I grew closer than we had ever been. I helped around the house, drove him to medical appointments, and listened to stories about Mom that he had never shared before. In the absence of Michael's constant presence, Dad seemed to see me clearly for the first time. One evening, about 6 months after my return, Dad broached the subject of the family business. Michael's done well with the company, he began, his tone measured, expanded into residential projects, hired more crews. But he's different than I was at his age, more focused on profits than people. I nodded, unsure where the conversation was heading. The thing is, Emma, I've been watching you since you came home. The way you handle yourself, the way you think through problems, you've got leadership qualities I never fully appreciated before. The Army tends to instill those things, I replied, downplaying the compliment. Maybe so, but I think they were always there, he said, pausing to choose his words carefully. I've been thinking about the future of the company, about legacy. That conversation marked the beginning of Dad's gradual inclusion of me in business discussions. Nothing formal at first, just asking my opinion on management issues or having me look over contract proposals. When I suggested implementing a program to hire and train veterans, Dad enthusiastically supported the idea, allocating resources without hesitation. Michael's reaction to my growing involvement was predictably negative. During his Sunday visits, he would make dismissive comments about my lack of experience in construction or question the value of military leadership. In a civilian business context, playing soldier for a few years doesn't qualify you to make business decisions. He remarked during one particularly tense dinner, "Dad's just letting you feel included out of pity." Dad surprised us both by slamming his hand on the table. "That's enough, Michael. Your sister served this country with honor, and she's earned my respect and yours. The decisions I make about my company are mine alone." The rebuke left Michael seething but temporarily silenced. After that incident, his Sunday visits became less frequent, with business trips and family obligations serving as convenient excuses. As Dad's health continued to decline, our late-night conversations took on greater significance. During one such talk, about a year after my return, he brought up the subject of his will. "I've been meeting with Richard," he said, referring to his longtime friend and attorney, "making some changes to my estate planning." "Dad, we don't need to discuss this," I protested, uncomfortable with the direction. "We do, Emma. I need you to understand my thinking." His expression was serious. "I've worked my whole life to build something that would outlast me, something that would take care of my family. For years, I assumed that meant leaving everything to Michael." He took a deep breath before continuing, "But I've realized that's not necessarily what's best for the company or the people who depend on it for their livelihoods. Michael has changed. The values I built this business on don't seem to matter to him anymore." Over the following weeks, Dad occasionally mentioned meetings with Richard, but never elaborated on the specifics of the changes to his will. Michael somehow caught wind of these meetings, and his attitude toward me grew increasingly hostile. Twice, he showed up unannounced at Dad's house when I was there, demanding private conversations that left Dad exhausted and upset. During this time, I received several calls from Laura checking in on my adjustment to civilian life. During one call, I confided my concerns about the family situation. "Just be careful, Emma," she advised. "Family disputes over inheritance can get ugly fast. Document everything, especially any threats or concerning behavior from your brother." Her warning proved prescient. As Dad's health deteriorated further, Michael's visits became more confrontational. He accused me of manipulating Dad, of turning him against his own son. I did my best to avoid direct conflict, focusing instead on making Dad's final months as comfortable as possible. One evening, about 18 months after my return home, Dad and I were watching his favorite old western when he reached for my hand. "I'm proud of you, Emma," he said simply. "I wish I had told you that more often throughout your life." He suffered a massive heart attack in his sleep. By the time I found him the next morning, he was gone. The funeral was held on a crisp autumn day, the kind Dad had always loved for working outdoors. The church overflowed with people whose lives he had touched: employees, clients, friends, and neighbors. I stood at the front, greeting mourners and accepting condolences, while Michael and Sarah arrived fashionably late, making their entrance just as the service was about to begin. Throughout the ceremony, I noticed Michael whispering to various business associates, his expression more calculating than grief-stricken. When it came time for eulogies, Michael spoke first, painting a picture of himself as the devoted son who had sacrificed his own ambitions to help his father build the family legacy. He mentioned me only in passing, referring to my extended absence during my military service. When my turn came, I spoke simply about Dad's kindness, his work ethic, and the values he had instilled in me. I shared memories of our time together after my return, careful not to emphasize our renewed closeness in a way that might seem like a slight to Michael. At the reception afterward, Michael made his first public dig at my military service. As I was speaking with Dad's oldest friend and former business partner, George Thompson, about my experiences returning to civilian life, Michael interjected, "Don't let her fool you, George. From what I understand, her time in the army was pretty cushy, pushing papers in some office while real soldiers did the fighting." George looked uncomfortable, but I maintained my composure. "Everyone serves in different capacities, Michael. Each role is essential to the mission." Sure, Michael smirked. "I'm just saying it's convenient that you come home without a scratch after supposedly serving in conflict zones. Some might find that suspicious." I felt my face flush with anger, but years of military discipline helped me maintain control. "This isn't the time or place, Michael." He shrugged and moved on to another group, leaving me shaken. How could he possibly know about my classified service record? And why was he so intent on undermining my military career? The following week, Richard contacted both Michael and me about the reading of the will. Your father requested that we do this formally in the county courthouse with Judge Thompson presiding. He explained. It's unusual, but given the nature of the estate and his specific instructions, I've arranged it as he wished. Michael seemed pleased by this news, clearly assuming the formal setting would lend weight to what he believed would be his complete inheritance of the business. Finally, we can put all this behind us and get back to running the company properly, he said, not bothering to hide his anticipation. The night before the will reading, I received a call from Richard. His voice was low and cautious. Emma, I wanted to give you a heads. Your father made significant changes to his will in the months before his passing. I can't discuss the details until tomorrow, but I want you to be prepared. Michael may not react well. Did Dad tell Michael about these changes? I asked. No, Richard replied after a brief hesitation. He felt it would only create conflict during his final days. He asked me to handle it after he was gone. After hanging up, I sat in Dad's study, surrounded by photographs and mementos of his life. One picture caught my eye. Dad and me at my Army commissioning ceremony. He was beaming with pride, his arm around my shoulders. It was one of the few times I had seen him look at me the way he often looked at Michael. The next morning, as I was preparing to leave for the courthouse, Michael showed up at Dad's house unannounced. He strode in without waiting for an invitation, Sarah trailing behind him with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. We need to talk, Emma, Michael demanded, his tone leaving no room for refusal. The will reading is in an hour, Michael. Whatever needs to be said can wait until after. No, it can't. He moved closer, invading my personal space in a way that would have been intimidating if I hadn't faced far worse in combat. I know what you did. What are you talking about? Don't play innocent. I know you manipulated Dad when he was vulnerable, turned him against me, filled his head with lies about how I was running his precious company into the ground. That's not true, Michael. Dad made his own decisions. He scoffed. Right, and I suppose it's just coincidence that after you show up playing the dutiful daughter, suddenly, Dad's meeting with lawyers and changing things that have been settled for years. Michael, honey, Sarah interjected, placing a manicured hand on his arm. This isn't helping. Let's just wait and see what the will says. He shook her off. No, Sarah. I want her to admit what she did. Dad built that company for me. Not for little sister who couldn't even handle real combat. The jab hit harder than he could know. I took a deep breath, centering myself the way Laura had taught me during particularly stressful operations. I didn't manipulate Dad. I simply came home and spent time with him. If that changed his perspective on certain things, that was his prerogative. Michael spat. You never cared about the business before. You ran off to play soldier instead of helping when Dad needed it, and now you think you can swoop in and claim what's rightfully mine. I didn't come home for the business, Michael. I came home because my service was complete, and I wanted to reconnect with my family. Family. That's rich coming from you. Where were you when Dad had his first heart attack 3 years ago? Where were you when the business almost went under during the recession? I was here dealing with everything while you were off on your little adventure. Before I could respond, he jabbed a finger toward my face. I've been looking into your service record, Emma. It's interesting what you can find out with the right connections. No combat decorations, no records of injury or special service. For someone who served in intelligence during wartime, your record is suspiciously clean, almost like you're hiding something. Or making it all up. The accusation left me momentarily speechless. Michael couldn't possibly have access to my classified records, which meant he was working with incomplete information and drawing his own conclusions. My service record is none of your business, Michael. It is when you use it to gain Dad's sympathy, to make yourself look like some kind of hero. His face twisted with contempt. Did you even serve overseas, or was that just another lie? That's enough. I rarely raised my voice. A habit formed during years of giving and receiving orders in high-stress situations. The sharp command made both Michael and Sarah flinch. We're going to be late for the will reading. This conversation is over. As I grabbed my coat and keys, Michael called after me. This isn't over, Emma. Not by a long shot. When everyone sees what a fraud you are, you'll wish you'd never come back. I walked out without responding, but his words echoed in my mind all the way to the courthouse. On impulse, I called Laura. I need your help, I said when she answered. My brother is making accusations about my service record, claiming I'm hiding something or making things up. He says he's been looking into my record. Laura's voice turned serious. That's concerning on multiple levels, Civilian access to detailed service records is limited, and if he's somehow getting information through unofficial channels, that's potentially illegal. He mentioned having connections, I explained. Even more concerning. Listen, Emma, we need to get ahead of this. I can be there by tomorrow morning. In the meantime, don't engage with his accusations. If he brings up your service record in public, simply state that some aspects of your service remain classified for national security reasons. Will that be enough? It should be for now. I'll bring the necessary documentation to address this properly when I arrive. As I pulled into the courthouse parking lot, I spotted Michael and Sarah already entering the building. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. The county courthouse was an imposing structure of red brick and white columns, a remnant of a more formal era. Courtroom 3, where the will reading was scheduled, was a small, wood-paneled room with high ceilings and uncomfortable wooden benches. I arrived 10 minutes early to find Michael and Sarah already seated in the front row. Richard arranging papers at a side table, and Judge Thompson reviewing documents at the bench. Richard nodded gravely when he saw me, gesturing to a seat on the opposite side from Michael. A few other people filtered in: Dad's accountant, his longtime administrative assistant, Clara, and, to my surprise, George Thompson, his former business partner. At precisely 10 o'clock, Judge Thompson called the room to order. She was a stern-looking woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "We are here for the reading of the last will and testament of James Robert Larson," she announced. "This is an unusual setting for a will reading, but Mr. Larson specifically requested judicial oversight of this process, and given his standing in the community, I agreed to preside." She nodded to Richard. "Counselor, you may proceed." Richard stood and cleared his throat. "Thank you, Your Honor. Before I begin, I want to note that James Larson amended his will approximately 4 months before his passing. The document I am about to read represents his final wishes as legally expressed and witnessed." From the corner of my eye, I saw Michael shift in his seat, his expression confident. He clearly still believed the formal setting was meant to emphasize the importance of his inheritance, not to protect it from potential challenges. Richard began reading the standard legal preamble, establishing Dad's sound mind and voluntary decisions. Then came the specific bequests, personal items to various friends, a generous donation to the local Veterans Support Center, and financial gifts to several longtime employees. "To my son, Michael James Larson," Richard continued, "I leave 49% of the shares in Larson Construction Incorporated, with the stipulation that major business decisions require board approval." The words hung in the air for a moment before their implication became clear. Not the controlling interest Michael had expected. I glanced over to see his confident smile falter, confusion spreading across his features. "To my daughter, Emma Grace Larson," Richard read, his voice steady. "I leave 51% of the shares in Larson Construction Incorporated and the position of chairperson of the board of directors." The room went completely silent. I felt as though I couldn't breathe. Dad had left me controlling interest in the company. The legacy he had always indicated would go to Michael alone. "This is ridiculous." Michael's voice shattered the silence. He stood abruptly, pointing at me. "She knows nothing about construction or running a business. This makes no sense." "Mr. Larson, sit down," Judge Thompson ordered sharply. "Outbursts will not be tolerated in my courtroom." Michael remained standing, his face flushed with anger. "Your Honor, my father was clearly not in his right mind when he made these changes. My sister manipulated him during his illness." "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Larson," Judge Thompson replied. "Do you have evidence to support it?" "Yes, I do." Michael turned to glare at me. "She swooped in after 8 years of absence when Dad was at his most vulnerable. She has no experience in construction, no business background. There's no logical reason for him to leave her controlling interest unless she manipulated him," Richard interjected. "Your Honor, I can attest that James Larson was of sound mind when he made these changes. He provided clear rationale for his decisions, which I documented thoroughly." "What possible rationale could there be?" Michael demanded. Richard looked to the judge, who nodded her permission for him to respond. Mr. Larson expressed that he had re-evaluated his children's respective strengths. After spending significant time with his daughter following her military service, he believed that her leadership experience and ethical approach to management would best serve the long-term interests of the company and its employees. Michael's laugh was bitter and mocking. Leadership experience, ethical approach. She was a paper pusher in intelligence if she even did that much. No benefits, no claims. She's a fake vet. The accusation echoed off the courtroom walls, stunning everyone into silence. Even Sarah looked mortified by her husband's outburst. Mr. Larson, Judge Thompson's voice cracked like a whip. That is enough. But Michael was beyond restraint, now pulling papers from his inside jacket pocket. I have documentation, Your Honor. I had a contact at the Veterans Affairs Office check her records. No combat service listed, no injuries reported, no special commendations, nothing that would justify the kind of leadership experience that supposedly impressed my father. He thrust the papers toward the judge. She's been lying to Dad, to everyone, about her service. Playing the wounded warrior when she probably never left a desk stateside. My mind was racing. How had Michael obtained information from the even if it was just confirmation of what wasn't in my records? Accessing that information without my consent was almost certainly illegal. Your Honor, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. Some aspects of my military service remain classified. The absence of certain information in standard records doesn't mean what my brother is suggesting. Michael scoffed loudly. Convenient excuse. Classified missions. Special Secret Service. This isn't a movie. Emma, stop lying. The courtroom doors opened, and Laura strode in, immaculate in her dress uniform adorned with the insignia of her rank and service medals. All heads turned at her entrance. Forgive the interruption, Your Honor, she said, approaching the bench. I'm Major Laura Mitchell, United States Army. I was Ms. Larson's commanding officer and am currently serving as her military legal representative. Judge Thompson raised an eyebrow. This is unexpected, Major. May I ask the purpose of your presence? I received information that Ms. Larson's service record was being mischaracterized in these proceedings. Given the classified nature of certain aspects of her service, I felt it necessary to intervene. Laura withdrew an envelope from her briefcase. I have documentation from the Department of Defense that may be relevant to these proceedings. She handed the sealed envelope to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Thompson. As the judge broke the seal and began reading, the courtroom remained silent, all eyes fixed on her face. I watched as her expression changed from professional interest to surprise and then to something approaching. Finally, she looked up, her gaze meeting mine briefly before she addressed the room. This court will take a 15-minute recess. Major Mitchell, Ms. Larson, and Mr. Larson, please remain. Everyone else is excused from the courtroom. As the others filed out, confusion evident on their faces, Michael approached Laura aggressively. Who the hell are you? Really, what kind of stunt is this? Laura's response was cool and professional. I assure you, Mr. Larson, this is no stunt. I've served alongside your sister in circumstances you cannot begin to comprehend. Once the room was cleared, except for the four of us, Judge Thompson spoke again. Officers, seal this court immediately. She called to the bailiffs at the door. They complied promptly, securing the entrance and posting themselves outside. The judge removed her reading glasses and looked directly at Michael. Mr. Larson, the accusations you've made against your sister are not only false but potentially damaging to national security. She turned to me, her expression softening slightly. Ms. Larson, the contents of this envelope explain a great deal that cannot be publicly acknowledged. I want to personally thank you for your service. Michael looked between us, confusion and anger warring on his face. What is going on here? What's in that envelope? Judge Thompson regarded him sternly. What I am about to share cannot leave this room. Is that understood? We all nodded, though Michael did so reluctantly. Ms. Larson's military service included classified operations of the highest sensitivity. Her actions during one particular mission saved numerous lives and provided intelligence that was critical to national security. She sustained severe injuries in the line of duty, injuries that were treated under classified protocols to protect operational security. Michael's mouth opened and closed, no words emerging. Due to the nature of her service, the judge continued, most of Ms. Larson's records are sealed at the highest levels. The documentation provided by Major Mitchell confirms that Ms. Larson received one of our nation's highest military honors in a private ceremony, again due to the classified nature of the operation. She fixed Michael with a piercing stare. In short, Mr. Larson, your sister is a genuine hero whose sacrifices for this country cannot be publicly acknowledged for reasons of national security. Your father was made aware of this fact through proper channels before amending his will. The color drained from Michael's face as the implications sank in. Not only was I not a fake vet, but I had served in ways that had earned recognition at the highest levels of military command, recognition that could not be publicly displayed or discussed. I didn't know, he stammered, looking genuinely shaken for the first time. "No, you didn't," Laura replied evenly. "And yet you chose to make public accusations based on incomplete information, potentially compromising operational security and certainly causing unwarranted distress to a decorated veteran." Judge Thompson gathered the papers back into the envelope and sealed it again. "In light of this information, Mr. Larson, do you wish to continue challenging your father's will?" Michael slumped into his seat, the fight gone out of him. "No, Your Honor." "Good. Then we will resume the proceedings and complete the reading of the will without further interruption. I trust there will be no more outbursts or accusations." As the others were called back into the courtroom, Michael avoided my gaze, staring down at his hands. The rest of the will reading proceeded without incident, with Richard detailing the remaining provisions of Dad's estate. When it was over, Michael hurried out without speaking to anyone. Sarah hesitated, then approached me uncertainly. "Emma, I had no idea about any of this. What Michael did, the things he said, I want you to know I didn't support it." I nodded, too emotionally drained to offer more than that simple acknowledgement as she left to follow her husband. Laura placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" "I will be," I replied, the full weight of the day's events beginning to sink in. Dad had known, somehow he had known the truth about my service, and in his final act, he had acknowledged what he could never say publicly, that he was proud of me, that he trusted me, that he saw my worth. As we left the courthouse together, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sorrow. The recognition I had sought for so long had come at a terrible price. The loss of my father and potentially any chance of reconciliation with my brother. The aftermath of the will reading unfolded in ways I never could have predicted. As Laura and I exited the courthouse, reporters from the local newspaper approached, clearly tipped off that something unusual had occurred in courtroom 3. Richard deftly handled their questions, explaining that Judge Thompson had validated James Larson's will and that I would be assuming leadership of Larson Construction as per my father's wishes. "Ms. Larson brings valuable leadership experience from her military service," Richard told them, carefully avoiding any classified details. James believed strongly that her vision for the company aligned with the values upon which he built the business. The reporters pressed for more information about the closed-door portion of the proceedings, but Richard remained firm. "Court records related to certain aspects of the will reading have been sealed by judicial order. That's all I can share at this time." Once we were safely away from prying ears, Laura suggested we continue our conversation at my apartment. "We need to discuss next steps and damage control," she explained. "Your brother's accusations may have been limited to that courtroom today, but there's no guarantee he won't speak to others." Back at my apartment, Laura laid out the situation clearly. "The Department of Defense is concerned about any potential breach of classified information. The fact that your brother somehow accessed, even redacted portions of your VA records is troubling." He mentioned having connections at the VA office, I recalled. Laura nodded grimly. "We're investigating that angle. Unauthorized access to veterans' records is a serious offense." "What happens now?" I asked, still trying to process everything. "Officially, nothing changes about your public record. You remain a veteran with honorable service, no publicly acknowledged special commendations or injuries." She smiled slightly. "Unofficially, steps have been taken to ensure that if anyone else tries to access your records the way your brother did, they'll encounter additional security measures." "And what about Michael? Will he face consequences for accessing my records?" Laura's expression turned serious. "That depends on how he obtained the information and what he does moving forward. If he continues making public accusations about your service, more direct intervention may be necessary." The next morning, I received a call from Judge Thompson's office requesting my presence for a private meeting. When I arrived, I found not only the judge but also a representative from the Department of Defense. I hadn't met before a stern-looking man in his 50s who introduced himself simply as Mr. Davis. "Ms. Larson," Judge Thompson began once we were seated, "I wanted to follow up on yesterday's proceedings. The situation with your brother is unusual and potentially problematic from a national security perspective." Mr. Davis took over. "We've determined that your brother obtained limited information about your VA records through a college friend who now works in records administration. While highly inappropriate and potentially illegal, the access was restricted to confirming what was not in your public records rather than accessing any classified information." "Is his friend going to be prosecuted?" I asked. "That's being handled separately," Mr. Davis replied, his tone making it clear he wouldn't elaborate. "Our immediate concern is ensuring your brother understands the sensitivity of the situation." Judge Thompson leaned forward. I've scheduled a private meeting with Michael for this afternoon. Mr. Davis will be present to impress upon him the seriousness of discussing classified matters. Even by implication, will I need to be there? The thought of facing Michael again so soon was exhausting. That won't be necessary, the judge assured me. In fact, it might be better if you weren't present. This meeting is primarily to ensure he understands the legal ramifications of his actions and the importance of discretion moving forward. Later that day, I received a text from an unknown number. Meeting complete. Brother understands situation. No further issues expected. Call if problems arise. Davis. The brief, almost cryptic message was oddly reassuring in its formality. 2 days later, I entered the Larson Construction offices for the first time as majority shareholder and chairperson. The receptionist, Linda, who had worked for Dad for over 20 years, greeted me with a warm hug. Your father would be so proud, she whispered. He talked about you all the time. You kept every letter you sent from overseas in his desk drawer. The revelation brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Even when I had felt distant from him, Dad had kept me close in ways I never knew. The company's management team had been informed of the change in leadership, and most welcomed me with professional courtesy, if some understandable apprehension. Michael's office was conspicuously empty. He hadn't been in since the will reading. As I settled into Dad's old office, my office now Richard, arrived with the final paperwork, transferring controlling interest in the company to me. Have you heard from Michael? I asked as we completed the signing. Richard shook his head. Not directly. His attorney contacted me yesterday to confirm that he won't be contesting the will. Beyond that, silence. A week passed, with no word from my brother. I began the process of learning the business from the ground up. Meeting with department heads, reviewing ongoing projects, and understanding the company's financial position. The veteran hiring initiative Dad and I had discussed became my first major policy implementation. 10 days after the will reading, Michael finally called. His voice on the phone was subdued, lacking the aggressive edge I had grown accustomed to. We need to talk, Emma. In person. We arranged to meet at a neutral location. A small coffee shop downtown at 47 Main Street that neither of us frequented. When I arrived, Michael was already there, seated in a corner booth, looking distinctly uncomfortable. The confident, borderline arrogant brother I knew had been replaced by someone who couldn't quite meet my eyes. Thank you for coming, he began awkwardly as I sat across from him. What did you want to discuss? I kept my tone professional, unsure of his intentions. Michael fidgeted with his coffee cup. First, I owe you an apology. What I said in court. The accusations I made, they were out of line. I nodded but didn't immediately respond, waiting to see if there was more. I didn't know, he continued. About your service. I mean, the judge and that government guy, they explained. Well, not specifics, but enough for me to understand I was wrong. You could have asked me. Michael, instead of digging through my records illegally, he had the grace to look ashamed. I know. I was angry and desperate. After Dad started changing, becoming closer to you, I convinced myself you must be manipulating him somehow. The only explanation I could think of was that you were exaggerating your military service to gain his sympathy. Dad changed because he got to know me as an adult. Michael, not because I manipulated him. I see that now, he said, taking a deep breath. They showed me something, not details, but a heavily redacted report, just enough to make it clear that whatever you did over there was real and significant. This was news to me. Apparently, Mr. Davis had decided a more concrete demonstration was necessary to convince Michael. The thing is, Michael continued, I've spent my whole life being James Larson's son, the heir to his company. It became my identity. When I realized he was changing the plan, giving you control instead of me, I couldn't handle it. It felt like he was rejecting everything I'd worked for. Everything I thought he wanted. For the first time, I could see the situation from Michael's perspective. His entire self-worth had been tied to being Dad's successor. My return and Dad's subsequent change of heart had shattered that identity. Dad didn't reject you, Michael. He just recognized that we both have different strengths. He valued yours, too. That's why you still have 49% of the company. But not control, he said quietly. No, I acknowledged, not control. We sat in silence for a moment, the years of competition and misunderstanding between us almost tangible. What happens now? He finally asked. With the company. I mean, that depends partly on you, I replied honestly. I'm learning the business as quickly as I can, but your experience is valuable. There's room for both of us at Larson Construction if you want to stay. The surprise on his face was evident. "You'd still want me involved after everything. You've built your life around this company, Michael. I won't take that away from you, but things will be different. Major decisions will be made collaboratively with the board's approval, and the veteran hiring program is non-negotiable." He nodded slowly. "I can work with that. It'll take some adjustment, but I can try." It wasn't a complete reconciliation. Too much had happened for that, but it was a start. As we parted ways outside the coffee shop, Michael hesitated, then awkwardly extended his hand. "For what it's worth, Emma, I am sorry, and I'm proud to have a sister who served our country the way you did, even if I can't know all the details." I took his hand, the first genuine contact between us in years. "Thank you, Michael, that means more than you know." As I watched him walk away, I realized that Dad's final decision had accomplished something neither Michael nor I had anticipated. It had forced us to confront the broken relationship we had ignored for so long and take the first tentative steps toward healing it. That night, I called Laura to update her on the meeting with Michael. He actually apologized. She asked, sounding impressed. "That's more than I expected." "Me too," I admitted. "I think whatever Mr. Davis showed him made quite an impact." "Good," Laura replied. "Sometimes people need to see concrete evidence before they can accept a truth that challenges their worldview." "Do you think he'll keep his word about discretion?" "I do," I said confidently. "The Dodd doesn't mess around with these things. My brother may be stubborn, but he's not stupid. He understands the consequences." As I hung up the phone, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The secret nature of my service had always created a barrier between me and civilian life, a part of myself I couldn't fully share. Now, at least within the confines of that courtroom and its aftermath, my sacrifice had been acknowledged. More importantly, it had been acknowledged by the two people whose recognition I had sought most, my father and my brother. The envelope that had changed everything in that courtroom had done more than protect my legal rights to Dad's estate. It had validated the years of service that could never be publicly celebrated, the injuries that still affected me daily, and the person I had become through those experiences. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I thought about Dad's final gift to me, not the company, not the financial security, but the recognition at last of my true worth. The months following the courtroom revelation brought changes I could never have anticipated. Taking control of Larson Construction meant stepping into a role I hadn't prepared for. But my military experience proved surprisingly applicable. Strategic planning, personnel management, crisis response, these skills transferred more readily than I expected. To the business world, my first major initiative was formally launching the veteran hiring program Dad and I had discussed. We partnered with local VA offices and military transition services to create pathways for veterans to enter the construction industry, providing training and mentorship. Within 6 months, we had hired 23 veterans in various roles. From project management to skilled trades, Michael and I established a wary but functional working relationship. He continued to oversee the operational aspects of the business while I focused on strategic direction and company culture. Our board meetings were occasionally tense but ultimately productive. True to his word, he never again questioned my military service or my right to lead the company. The physical and emotional scars from my service remained, of course, on particularly bad days, when the pain in my leg was intense or when a sudden loud noise triggered memories of that distant explosion. I would retreat to Dad's old fishing cabin by the lake. The solitude helped, but it wasn't enough. 6 months after taking over the company, I finally took Laura's long-standing advice and joined a support group for veterans with classified service histories. The group met monthly in a secure location 2 hours away, providing a rare space where we could speak freely about experiences that remained hidden from the rest of the world. "The hardest part," shared Daniel, a former Navy SEAL with similarly classified service, "is carrying the weight of something you can never fully explain, even to those you love most." His words resonated deeply. In that room, surrounded by others who understood the unique burden of unacknowledged sacrifice, I found a healing that had eluded me elsewhere. We were strangers connected by shared secrets, bonded by experiences that existed in the shadows of official records. On the first anniversary of Dad's death, I established the James Larson Memorial Foundation, dedicated to supporting veterans transitioning to civilian careers. Using a portion of my inheritance and company profits, the foundation provided scholarships, training programs, and business startup grants for former service members. At the foundation's launch event, I gave my first public speech as the head of Larson Construction. Without revealing classified details, I spoke about the challenges veterans face when returning to civilian life, particularly those whose most significant contributions remain unacknowledged due to security constraints. Some sacrifices are celebrated with medals and parades, I told the audience. Others happen in silence, known only to those who make them, and the few authorized to know. Both are equally valuable, equally worthy of our support and respect. The speech received unexpected media attention, bringing awareness to the Foundation's mission and the broader issues facing veterans with classified service records. Several military officials privately contacted me afterward, expressing gratitude for highlighting a reality rarely discussed in public forums. As the Foundation grew, so did my sense of purpose. The pain of Dad's loss and Michael's betrayal gradually transformed into something constructive, a legacy that honored Dad's values while creating new opportunities for those who had served our country. 18 months after the courtroom confrontation, Michael requested a private meeting. We sat in what had been Dad's office, now mine, surrounded by photographs, old and new. Among them was a picture of Dad and me during my last visit home before the mission that changed everything, and beside it, a group photo from the Foundation's most recent graduation ceremony. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Michael began, more tentative than I had ever seen him, about Dad, about us, about the way things happened. I waited, giving him space to continue. I was wrong, Emma, not just about your service, but about everything. I spent so many years convinced that Dad favored me, that I was entitled to his legacy, that I never stopped to consider why he might see something valuable in you, too. He gestured to the Foundation graduation photos. What you're doing with the company, with the Foundation, it's remarkable. Dad would be proud. I think he saw this potential in you, long before I did. Thank you, Michael, I said, genuinely moved by his admission. That means a lot. I have a proposal, he continued. Sarah and I have been discussing relocating. There's an opportunity to open a branch office in Raleigh. The market there is growing, and I think Larson Construction could establish a strong presence. You want to expand? This was unexpected. I do, but more than that, I want a fresh start. Running the Raleigh office would give me autonomy while still being part of the company, and it would give us both some space to heal from everything that's happened. The proposal made sense from both a business and personal perspective. Michael would have the leadership role he craved, while remaining connected to Dad's legacy. Our daily interactions would be limited, reducing the potential for conflict as we continued to work through our complicated relationship. I think Dad would approve, I said finally. Let's develop a formal proposal for the board. As Michael left my office that day, something shifted between us, not forgiveness exactly. Some wounds were still too fresh for that, but understanding. A recognition that we were both trying to honor Dad's memory in our own ways. The Raleigh branch opened 6 months later with Michael at the helm. Our professional interactions became more comfortable over time, and occasionally we even managed to share family dinners without tension. Sarah and I developed a friendship independent of my relationship with Michael, and I became a proper aunt to their children, who knew me as Aunt Emma, who was in the Army, without any of the complicated history. 3 years after Dad's passing, I stood at his grave on a crisp autumn morning. The polished granite headstone read simply, James Robert Larson, beloved father, builder of dreams. I placed fresh flowers beside it and sat on the small bench nearby. I wish you could see it all, Dad, I said quietly. The company is thriving. The Foundation has helped over 200 veterans start new careers. Michael and I are finding our way. In the distance, I could see Laura waiting respectfully by the cemetery gate. We had maintained our friendship beyond the professional relationship, and she had become one of my closest confidants, one of the few people who knew the full truth of my service and my journey since. As I rose to leave, I touched the headstone one last time. Thank you for seeing me, Dad, for really seeing me when no one else could. The journey from that courtroom revelation to this moment had been long and often painful. I still carried the physical scars of my service and the emotional scars of family discord, but I had also found strength I didn't know I possessed, purpose in helping others like me, and, eventually, a measure of peace. Sometimes healing doesn't mean the pain disappears entirely. Sometimes it means the pain transforms into something that drives you forward instead of holding you back. My classified service had taught me to carry burdens silently, but Dad's final act had taught me that being seen and valued, even if only by a few, makes those burdens easier to bear. As I walked back toward Laura and the future that awaited, I carried with me the most important lesson of all. Sometimes we lose something precious to discover something invaluable within ourselves. I had lost my father and nearly lost my relationship with my brother, but I found a strength and purpose that would guide me forward. If you're carrying invisible wounds, or fighting battles others cannot see, know that your struggle matters, even when it goes unrecognized. Have you ever had to prove your worth to someone who refused to see it? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be fighting similar battles. Remember, sometimes the most meaningful victories are the ones that happen quietly in the chambers of our own hearts.